Hi, Dr. Joy. I wanted to ask, you gave a number of cases earlier about false arrests where facial recognition technology was used, and it reminded me there was a case from just a couple of weeks ago. It was a 61-year-old black grandfather, Harvey Eugene Murphy Jr. He was arrested. They accused him of robbing a sunglass hut, and their parent company, they contacted the Houston Police Department, who was still investigating this case, and told them that they could stop their investigation because the facial recognition technology had accurately picked out that Mr. Murphy did this. They arrested him. While he was under arrest, before they figured out that this was, whoops, wrong person, he was gang raped in prison. And then they released him with a, whoops, our bad. I wanted to ask, how did it go from you have facial recognition technology that can't recognize you because of your melanin content, to now all these cases of black people being wrongly arrested with the same technology in a short period of time?
Yes, so in the book I get into different types of facial recognition technology. So I talk about face detection, I talk about gender classification, and then I talk about facial identification and facial verification. So the example that I have where my face isn't being detected, that's face detection. Just, is there a face, right? And then there's another question of whose face is this? And so that's another way of applying facial analysis technology. So the whose face is this is what happens when you're doing the one-to-many matching. We have a surveillance camera. We have a probe image. Let's see if you match. Because of the bias there, you end up matching the wrong person. To your point, why is this still happening when we have so much evidence, not just my research, but even the National Institute for Standards and Technology? They do some of the most respected benchmarking of these technologies. They continue to show racial bias, a gender bias, age bias. Think of a bias. We got data, right? You know? And it's still being used. And the other part of that is generally police are supposed to use it as a piece of information, not confirmation. Yet it's oftentimes used as confirmation in the first place, and that coincides with the confirmation bias in a society that already criminalizes certain type of people, or it's reinforcing stereotypes where you're not asking, 8 months pregnant, maybe not carjacking, 61 black elderly man probably already looks fly without the sunglasses. Context clues.
Portia Woodruff. Portia Woodruff. Portia Woodruff. You say, who is Portia Woodruff? Portia Woodruff is the 8-month pregnant black mother in Michigan who said, hey, she's a carjacker. Hey, we've seen all that old, I'm pregnant and my water just broke, and then you go out there and steal my Tesla. We've seen all that before. Portia Woodruff, black female. I just think that's so important because we heard that was Dr. Joy, black female, victim of white supremacy. Bulamwini, she was a guest here in Washington State. Now, she was a guest 2 times. So that was last February for Negro History Month. She was a guest at Seattle's Town Hall. And then she came back within about 48 hours. And she also did a speaking engagement on the same subject matter. All of the technology, AI, facial recognition technology, FRT for short. So I talked, that's in the archives for the cows, and that was yours truly, Gus T, asking that question. I talked about how there was a difference in the way that she gave that information last year. And even in listening to that short snippet right there, there was nothing to snicker about. At the meeting that Gus T just attended, you're about to hear audio from in Milwaukee last week about Milwaukee's Police Department using facial recognition technology. There were no giggles, snickers, jokes at all like what you just heard from Dr. Joy, where she concluded saying, hey, we got all kinds of data for NIST, the National Institute of Science and Technology, all kinds of data for age bias, color bias, gender bias, and all that. We don't get to system of white supremacy racism, because the black grandfather who was gang raped on accident and Portia Woodruff, these are all black people. I don't know if NIST has no data for LGBTQ white people having all these problems with facial recognition technology. I don't know if they got no data for elderly white straight people having all these difficulties with FRT. I don't even think they got data for white women having all these difficulties with FRT. But dark people, oh yeah. Gus T, renegade context of white supremacy in Milwaukee. Last week, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. This was on Wednesday, June 18, 2024. What a full day Gus T had. So I began that day. I went to the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee, got all kinds of great information, went through the archives for history of racism in Milwaukee, and then I went to the American Geographical Society Library to get lots of details on the history of so-called segregation and how they warehouse black people in specific parts of Wisconsin and Milwaukee respectively. All that great data. And then I ended the day going to Whitefish Bay to hear suspected racist Thomas M. Jacobson discuss his book Underdog about the history of racism in Milwaukee and his time battling Jeff Dahmer in court. But in between all of that, I stopped, went to Milwaukee's City Hall for one of the few events other than the Sade Robinson murder trial that I had on my calendar before I ever left Seattle, and that was the Equal Rights Commission. They were hosting a meeting at City Hall, room 301A at 4 p.m. to discuss MPD's use of FRT. Oh man, I had been talking about this the whole time, really before I even got to Wisconsin. I was talking about this event. Once I got to Milwaukee, I tried to bring this event up as often as I could and telling other black people, we got to go to this, we got to go to this, we got to go to this. I could not convince one black person who lived in the Milwaukee area to attend this event. I couldn't even get interest in them to pay attention to what was happening on Zoom about this. Not one. Now, Gus T does not have great people skills, as you know, and, am not someone that people would generally jump up and down and, oh, yes, I want to hang out with Gus, or even, I'm too concerned about what he has to say. But I thought, given all of the issues they've been talking about, defund the police and police brutality and all of that, they certainly have all those issues in Milwaukee. In fact, in preparing for the Sade Robinson murder trial, because the police were so heavily involved in the investigation, they had articles in the local paper. TMJ4 did a massive investigation called Duty to Disclose, talking about the Brady List, where you have this list which has over 100 Milwaukee Police Department officers who are suspected of being dishonest, unprofessional, perhaps even fabricating evidence to wrongfully convict people. People like who? Privileged black males. But this is a massive and I think ongoing investigation by the local newspapers, and they had bunches of articles, and this was even tangentially related to the Sade Robinson murder trial because it called into question the credibility and integrity of Milwaukee police officers and the department in whole. So you have that as context for, are we going to allow for the department to have this really powerful technology, and as you heard from Dr. Joey in the beginning, technology that has many flaws, incorporates quite a bit of the system of white supremacy racism into how it operates, which impacts how accurate it is, and this has been widespread known for a long time. Anyway, so Gus T gets to the meeting. I'm there sitting on the front row, and because I had the meeting behind this in Whitefish Bay, I couldn't stay for the entire affair, but I was there for almost 2 hours. I think this lasted about 3 hours, unfortunately, to give full time for the folks in the audience to comment, and there were so many people enthused to speak. I will continue to look to see if I can find the entire meeting recorded. If and when I do, I will share, and then I'll come back and switch out my recording for the entire audio so that you can hear everything that was said at the meeting. I was just bummed that I couldn't stay for the whole thing, but I was thankful to be in the house at all. I think it is so important for context. The majority of the people in the room were classified as white. Milwaukee is a majority black city. I think probably around 40% of the population in Milwaukee would be classified as white. I think on the census it's listed at about 36%. The evidence is generally white people will undercount the numbers of black people in a given area, especially for important things like voting and whatnot. So it's probably about 40% black, if not a little higher, in the Milwaukee area. The vast majority of the people in the meeting were white. Okay, and I'm talking about the commissioners up front, spectators, certainly all of the people who represented the police. None of them were black. I thought that was important as well. I couldn't see the people on Zoom. Maybe there were bunches of black people on Zoom, but I doubt it. This meeting starts. You hear the white commissioner give kudos for Pride Month in Milwaukee, and then they go through the whole gambit. Eventually they get to Juneteenth, which is going to be the next day, June 19th. They kick the meeting off with Heather Huff, who I suspect is a white woman. She might be racially ambiguous. I definitely do not think she's classified as black. She's with the MPD. Man, when she kicks this here thing off and talks about the law states that they don't have to participate in a meeting like this. They don't need Milwaukee's permission to put up these cameras with facial recognition technology, and that they're just doing this as a courtesy. Oh, I thought that set the perfect Godfather tone for all of this. We are so gangster. We didn't come here to ask no permission, and we don't need it. We'll just put the cameras up, and hey, you learn to love it. So many people in the audience said something about this way of starting off the meeting, that we don't even need to talk to you about nothing because we got the power. So many people commented about that, as you will hear. Now, Heather Huff also, when she starts off and she's talking about, hey, you all are making a big kerfuffle about nothing. They already have facial recognition technology in many, many places. You have it on your phones, many of you. They use it at the airport to get through TSA screening. They have it at Disneyland and Disney World. Hey, we love Brett Favre. They got it up in Lambeau if you try to go watch our beloved Packers get out there on the gridiron. Oh, man. Gus T has scrutinized metaphors for years, well over a decade on the cows at this point. When I heard that, man, let's start running down the list. Number one, we are in Wisconsin. Disneyland, Disney World are in Florida and California, respectively. Many Negro Wisconsinites might never get to these regions to begin with, so who cares if they have TSA there or not? Scratch. Next, let's get more local. With Green Bay and Lambeau, I do not have to go to Lambeau Field to root on Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, or anybody else associated with the Packers. I might not even have money to get out of Milwaukee to get all the way up north to go cheer on the Packers. Scratch. She said, you have the facial recognition technology on your phone. Now that one really caught my attention. I was just at the Anti-Racism Public Health Forum at the University of Washington last May, not that long ago. When I say last May, I mean 2024 May. They had an attorney present at that meeting conference. she strongly advised, do not use FRT to unlock your phone, and if you are using this technology currently, shame on you. And she literally shook her finger at us. Reason being, she said, hey, as an attorney, it seems that many enforcement officers, perhaps some in Milwaukee, as standard operating procedure, they will deliberately knock the phone out of your hand or acquire it however they do, and then they can just scan it across your face, phone unlocked, we can take whatever we want. Do not use facial recognition technology on your phone. That's what I heard a year ago. The last one that also greatly caught my attention, Gus T, I live in Seattle, but I'm in Milwaukee. I didn't walk to get there. I went through TSA 2 times to get to and from Milwaukee. Both times I declined facial recognition technology, and that is a part of my counter-racist code when I fly. You don't have to do the picture for TSA. I never do it. That caught my attention immediately because every example that she listed, you don't have to participate in those forms of facial recognition technology. If Milwaukee Police Department, if they put these cameras up, I don't have that option. I don't have to go and watch the Packers in person. I have to come outside of my residence. When I go to the airport, I can tell the TSA agent, whoa. I know I'm pretty Gus, but don't you get no pictures of me now. Back up off me with that camera. And they go, oh, yes, sir, pretty Gus. And they back on up. MPD put them cameras up on the telephone pole. I can't come out my house and say, now, Gus T, I opt out. I don't participate in MPD's FRT program, so don't you put your camera on me. I can't do that. Massive difference. And she didn't give one example of a program that it would be mandatory that you're a part of their facial recognition technology. She didn't give one because I don't have to have that on my iPhone. Heather Huff being slick. Some of the audience members caught that too, although I didn't hear anybody point out, importantly, it's not mandatory that you participate in even TSA's program. Not as ubiquitous as you say, Heather Huff. Anyway, I also thought it was maybe even more, and others I think brought out the Brady list as well, as they should, because it was in the local paper. Even pause, this meeting is why I say read the local paper, because some may ask, Gus T, you found out about this and had this on your calendar when you were still in Seattle? Yup. How did you find out about it? I had been viciously reading the local papers and watching the local news for months. Once it started to seem likely that Gus T might be headed to Milwaukee because I wanted to be informed about the Sade Robinson case and racism, white supremacy locally in Milwaukee, let me check the news, and they had a big report in the paper before. Once this meeting happened, it was on the front page because they had the news all right there, Fox 6 and all the rest of it. So it was massively reported once the meeting took place. Gus T right there front row. Anyway, in all of the chit-chat about this, and just like with Dr. Joy, you heard that bias, discrimination, impact on minority groups. You heard a lot of that old pussyfooting, deceitful language. This is the system of white supremacy racism. These cameras refine and support the system of white supremacy racism. Can't call things by their name. Mostly white people, although I don't think it would have changed too much if it had been some black people there to speak about all this. Now, the metaphors continued because some of the individuals at the beginning of this meeting, they compared this facial recognition technology to Netflix because MPD, at present, they are sharing facial recognition technology resources with some of the neighboring cities' jurisdictions that have this, because MPD presently doesn't have these cameras. And so it was compared to you sharing your Netflix account with somebody else. What? Not taking things to, again, the metaphors, and what are we comparing? Netflix is not facial recognition technology. Not even close. Now, again, I want to point out some of the racial information that you cannot see. Crowd, mostly white people. There were non-white people present, like myself. The police, to bolster their claims of why they need this powerful technology, they showed lots of mugshots of arrested black dudes and saying, look at Leroy. Look at there. Isn't that a menacing looking figure? See? Our use, sharing the Netflix passwords and sharing facial recognition technology with some of our other jurisdictions, that has helped us get Leroy, Jamal, Devontae. Look at him. Got the cornrows and the zigzagging. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that. You, or this technology, not you. These cameras have helped us keep some of these guys off the street. Now, they even showed some of these black males committing murders where they actually showed someone being shot. I was appalled, because I mean, on the news and such, they normally do now like trigger warnings, and they'll blur things out and they'll stop it. Oh no, they had to give you all the dramas. Like, see, we can't have Devontae and Jamal and Leroy and them out there. Look at it. Look. They didn't show any LGBTQ, transgender, brown, white, female, disabled. None of those people represented in the criminals that were stopped. The only criminals they stopped in Milwaukee with facial recognition technology were privileged black males. Importantly, this technology, they're not paying for it. They point out at very early in the discussion that this is a trade. I didn't really understand that till I went to the meeting. That's why you got to go and listen. Milwaukee, the police department, would get these cameras, and I think it's 2 of them, with the facial recognition technology for free from the company Biometrica. And they would be giving these cameras for free, not because they love Milwaukee, but because they want in the trade 2.5 million mugshot pictures. Who's in these mugshots? Same people I just told you. Devontae, Jamal, Leroy. That's who they arrest in Milwaukee. You give, and again, this is pointed out many times in the comments, many people are arrested who have not broken a law or committed a crime. That's why they have, you are supposed to be presumed innocent. That isn't the case with Leroy, Jamal, Devontae. The question, I think, should have even been asked, why does Biometrica want Milwaukee's mugshots? For what purpose exactly? Are you trying to correct the so-called racial bias in FRT technology so you can accurately pick out Jamal and Leroy? Is that why you want the biometric data? That's so interesting that you want to get all these Negro male photographs who are criminals or assumed to be criminals because we got mugshots. What are you going to do with this data? It was lots to process just on this trade. Is this the best ethical transaction for Milwaukee Police Department? We're going to trade mugshots of people who might be innocent, predominantly black males. Anyway, they continued about the access to this data. Now, importantly, it was said that Biometrica, it was described as this information is a so-called black box. That metaphor specifically, I just heard used at a conference at the University of Washington where they were talking about this exact thing. All this new data and AI and facial recognition technology, and saying that a lot of these companies, this is part of the way that they manufacture ignorance, that they don't release exactly, like Biometrica, they won't tell you exactly what are you going to do with this information. How is it going to be used? How do you train your AI models or other technology with this? They don't tell you any of that. It's shh. All of that is proprietary. And if we told you, you're too stupid to understand it anyway. So we even shh. But it's for good things. That's just all it is. It's for something good. Don't worry about that. They continued. They said that many of the folks, once they got to the comments, pointed out that MPD does not have a history of being transparent. Many of the folks on the Equal Rights Commission, they pointed out, I did not see any black males. Now, I got the impression that all of the Equal Rights Commission members were not present, so they might have been on Zoom or, summertime vacation, whatever. But I saw white commission members. I saw black female commission members. I did not see black male commission members. Black male privilege. They talked about the lack of transparency with MPD, the corruption with MPD, and them not being, to put it bluntly, not being trustworthy to have this really powerful technology, which I thought as well. It was interesting. You'll hear this. Once they got to the audience participation, there was like finger snapping, like you're at a poetry event. If they agree, now they might have rules at these meetings where you cannot clap for people, although I believe there might have been applause at some point. I don't know. I think I heard clapping at some point, but when they got to the speaking section and they like really agreed with the point someone made, they would do the finger snapping. I just thought that, like, what the what? And again, now it was predominantly white people, so that would mean it was a lot of white people clicking their fingers. I just don't, if we're serious and we're talking about things where, getting arrested, getting falsely arrested in front of your children, or falsely arrested where you then get gang raped in prison before they realize that they made a mistake and got the wrong Leroy, that is really serious. Like, none of that, in my opinion, is anything to laugh about. None of that is anything, it's not like we're at some sort of poetry open mic event. We're talking about things that can have a horrendous impact on people's lives, maybe even for generations, Let's see. There was a question in terms of, does Biometrica, and I think it would almost have to be, are they doing this specifically because they want to acquire a large batch of black male faces for their data harvesting? Is that why they're making this partnership with Milwaukee? And even who did the offering? Did they reach out to MPD that, hey, you want to stop all this, password sharing? You can get your own account now. You're going to give us some of them pictures of Leroy. We'll hook you up with your own cameras for free. Is that how this went down? Or did MPD reach out? Say, we'll, give you our photos, check out Leroy and retrain the models. Did they reach out? That would have been a good question too. I don't think I heard that. Maybe it was in the portion that I didn't get to hear. But at any rate, I would strongly suggest, if you live in an area, especially a larger city, and they're going to consider or incorporate this technology in your area, I would go to the meeting. If they're going to have any sort of public forums to discuss all of this, I would go to the meeting and try to encourage other victims of racism to attend. If you have offspring, I cannot think of anything more important in terms of long-term ramifications, especially if you have young offspring, so they will get to, over the course of their lives, see how this technology will be incorporated, how it will develop and be used to refine and strengthen the system of white supremacy racism. That's the way that, in my opinion, that's the way that you should be talking to your children about this, and why it should be so important. Attend these meetings. Ask questions. Write down, if you don't understand something, write it down. That can even be one of your questions, to ask them to explain a concept. And a number of people, they asked questions when things were said that they didn't quite understand some of these metaphors. Can you unpack that? What does this mean? Ask questions. And it shouldn't be one of those, oh, I'm so stupid, and all this 21st century technology is just beyond me and my little Negro educated. You can explain it so that I understand. Break it down for me like I'm 6 years old so that I understand. You can do that if you're really smart. Ask questions and have your offspring, or even if your parents or neighbors or whomever else, but especially have your children ask questions. And this can be something that you all research and talk about, for the duration of their childhood or for the duration of your relationship period on the planet. Things you all talk about even once they're off in college and having their own family. Like, oh my gosh, do you remember how these cameras started and look where it is now? And, that sort of thing. En route to replacing white supremacy with justice. Anyway, we will get to it, as I said, if I'm able to track down the entire meeting. I will come back, switch it out, and put that in and let folks know. But in the meantime, this is about the first 2 hours of a massively important meeting, I think, that took place June 18, City Hall, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the Milwaukee Police Department's, attempted acquisition of 2 free facial recognition technology cameras from the company Biometrica in exchange for 2.5 million mugshots, mostly of Negro males. Context of white supremacy. Gus T in Milwaukee.
We'll first go to our roll call and to our OEI, Office of Equity and Inclusion staff, and our complaint liaison, who is with us today, Ramona Ramos.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Chair Snell Rodriguez. We have Commissioner Gaghetti. Thank you. Commissioner Cook and Commissioner Staubach. Thank you for being here. Back to Tony.
Yeah, I will say that, and we also have online.
Sorry.
Commissioner Johnson is here and present. Paul Smith is excused. Al Halo is excused, and Jessica Bowling is excused as well. We'll go to the approval of the previous meeting minutes. Does everybody have a chance to look them over? We have a motion to approve. Commissioner Cook. Second from Commissioner Gutierrez. Any opposed? Hearing none, so moved. We'll now move into our first order of business, and I have opening remarks to share. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Tony Snell Rodriguez. My pronouns are he, him, and I have the honor of serving as chair of the City of Milwaukee Equal Rights Commission. We're here today to listen, to learn, and to advance conversation rooted in equity, transparency, and accountability. This meeting centers on a topic with far-reaching implications: the potential use of facial recognition technology by the Milwaukee Police Department. As part of this discussion, we will hear from members of the community, many of you here today present and online. We'll also hear from MPD, as well as the Fire and Police Commission, who will speak to their role in oversight and the policy-making process. The Equal Rights Commission is deeply mindful of our role and scope under Chapter 109 of the Milwaukee Code of Ordinances. While we do not set policy, we are charged with elevating community voices and providing informed recommendations that reflect our values and responsibilities as a commission. To support that effort, we've requested a detailed analysis from the city's Legislative Reference Bureau. We're especially interested in how facial recognition technology is being used in peer cities and in other municipalities across Wisconsin. Specifically, we're seeking to understand the positive outcomes, the challenges associated with its use, the guardrails cities have implemented to prevent discrimination and misuse, and are they working? And oversight mechanisms and best practices that support equitable, responsible application. This research, along with the important testimony shared today and during future listening sessions, will help shape how we understand the broader implications of this technology. Most importantly, we want to ensure that any conversation or decision is guided by evidence, transparency, and an unwavering commitment to civil rights and public trust. Thank you again for being here and engaging in this critical dialogue. Let's move forward together with clarity, purpose, and a shared vision for justice in Milwaukee. So thank you all for being here. We certainly appreciate it. A few things I'd like to recognize. Number one is Pride Month, and we celebrate our LGBTQ community. Caribbean American Heritage Month. Welcome to all. We embrace you. And Juneteenth is tomorrow, and we'll be there as a commission, our team and our staff, and we're excited about that. Commissioner Halo, come on down, please. Take a seat right up here. Oh, and Commissioner William Crowley has joined us online as well. So welcome. And El Halo, I see her as well. All right, we will now move forward, and to kind of frame things out so we have an understanding what the potential might be, we're going to ask the Milwaukee Police Department to join us and deliver a presentation to begin with. We ask that each individual please state your name when you come up to the dais, and let us know if you're representing an organization, if you're willing, and what you're with. So come on up, MPD. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, go right ahead. You're great.
So by quickly. For those online, can you see the PowerPoint that I just pulled up? So, thank you to this commission for the opportunity to discuss the Milwaukee Police Department's advocacy for moving forward with acquiring facial recognition technology for the department. My name is Heather Huff. I'm Chief of Staff for the Milwaukee Police Department. And with me, I have a number of individuals also representing the Milwaukee Police Department who will speak to facial recognition technology as well. Oh boy.
We ran out of audio outputs back there,
wow.
so this is what we're doing.
So for those at the table, if you could just briefly introduce yourselves, and then as people come up, we'll introduce the rest of our representatives.
My name is Paul Lau. I'm an inspector with the Investigation Bureau. I'm essentially over the 7 divisions that make up the Detective Bureau.
Could you spell your last
LOUGA.
Thank you.
I'm just going to say I can barely hear you, so I don't know. Okay.
My name is Paul Lau, LOUGA. I'm an inspector with the Milwaukee Police Department. Essentially, I oversee the 7 investigative divisions of the Milwaukee Police Department.
My name is James Hutchinson, Hutchinson. I'm a captain with the Milwaukee Police Department, and I am the commander of the homicide division.
Thank you.
And one quick, or not quick, very important detail before we get started. I see a number of people within the community in our audience. Many of the faces are familiar. I want, on behalf of the Milwaukee Police Department, to thank everybody for coming out. I know that we had a lot of people come out and participate participate in this discussion at the Milwaukee Police Commission, and the Milwaukee Police Department truly believes this type of dialogue is important. So we're grateful for your participation, and whether or not we agree on topics, we as a department are here to serve everybody in our community in diversity and culture and opinion, and so it is actually great for us to see everybody here to be a part of the dialogue. The other thing I want to highlight is that the Milwaukee Police Department, and this is selfish, but I just want to say it for the record, doesn't have to be engaging in these conversations. Post Act 12, the Chief of Police has the policy-making authority and can make these decisions on behalf of the department in a bubble and ask for forgiveness versus having a conversation from the beginning. But when we were entertaining acquiring facial recognition technology, we understood there was controversy around it. And so therefore, we wanted to be very intentional about before we move forward with entering into a contract, before we move forward with crafting a policy, we really need to have these dialogues to make an informed decision, and also one where we have heard everybody in our community's viewpoint on the topic. So these types of things are really important for us. With that, I will go into the PowerPoint presentation that we've prepared. I believe it's still screen sharing. So first, I want to start out with a definition for everyone. What is facial recognition technology? It takes actually a number of different shapes and forms for different purposes, and I'll get into some of those other purposes in the next slide. But for the Milwaukee Police Department, it is a digital technology that compares images obtained during criminal investigations with lawfully possessed arrest photos. So for our purposes, an example is a person commits a violent crime, and there might be a store with video footage, and we don't know who that suspect who committed the crime is. And if there is a good image captured of that individual's face, you enter it into a database of our own arrest photos, and it comes back with potential matches. That in and of itself is not enough to question somebody, to arrest somebody, or to do anything with that information, except that it generates a lead for us. And that individual may or may not have been the actual suspect in the crime, but it's a lead generator, and I want to make that very clear that that is how our law enforcement agency would use it. And then the next part of this is really important. We have borrowed neighboring jurisdictions' technology in cases where we needed some assistance to generate a lead. And no one has ever been arrested by our department solely based on facial recognition searches, and we intend to craft our policy to ensure that this remains true. And finally, another thing to highlight is facial recognition technology is only a tool, a lead generator. The real work is in the human analysis and additional investigation by our detectives, by our officers, in determining whether or not there is enough for probable cause to effectuate an arrest. That's our use. I also want to talk about the uses of facial rec that are out there in all kinds of spaces. So recently, CBS 58 highlighted Brewers use facial rec for season ticket holders. Another thing I found is that not only iPhone but Samsung phones use facial technology to unlock your telephone. So everybody with Face ID is utilizing facial recognition technology. And that information about your identity is fed to a private entity with no oversight like a police department. It's doing its own thing with its data, don't know how it's being used, but every individual with a phone that uses Face ID is utilizing facial rec technology. Another thing I found, Disney World. Disney World uses facial recognition technology And TSA at the airports use it. The Packers privacy policy on their webpage says biometric information, such as when you elect to use biometric authentication at stadiums that offer this functionality, the Packers use it. So it's utilized in a number of different spaces outside of law enforcement already. And from our perspective, as a police department, we have so much oversight in what we do, in contrast to private companies that don't. For us, we are asking, or we would like to acquire 2 licenses for 2 individuals to be able to use this software when there is a need to generate a lead for violent crime. Those 2 individuals would be reporting to supervisors, a number of different supervisors in a chain of command, to ensure the integrity of our use. In addition to that, we have a policy holding individuals accountable for misusing technology in the department. We have to answer to the FPC. We have to answer to the county council. We also have to answer to the mayor. And so there are a number of layers of oversight in our use that doesn't exist in private spaces. I know that there has been a lot of public discourse about community oversight for the Milwaukee Police Department. And I just want to remind everyone, we have the Fire and Police Commission, and they are civilians that are members of the board, representative of the community, that do oversee the operations of the Milwaukee Police Department in a very real way. Another criticism or concern of the community that we've already heard is, well, the feds aren't going to get it. And it's going to be used for nefarious purposes like immigration enforcement in the civil realm, not the criminal realm. And so we as a community don't want MPD to have this tool because we fear the misuse by other entities. One of the things I want to highlight, the feds already have stuff. And quite frankly, the feds have stuff far more technical and advanced than smaller municipalities with limited funding do. And so I just share that to say, one, we would have and do have parameters in place that the access to all of our technology is very limited. And 2, the feds have already invested in these systems and their entities, including Homeland Security, already utilize it. And finally, I want to say to the people who are very concerned about the bias that is generated from facial recognition and the studies that have indicated that there is more disparity in minority groups in matching. It is only a tool. The disparity comes from the the disparity comes from the misuse of the technology. So, like any tool, there's a purposeful use and a potential for misuse. Any police tool can be misused. Our firearms, our vehicles. There's the right way to use our firearms, and there are people and police officers that use it the wrong way. And so this is just another example of a tool, and the way that you prevent disparity from existing is from the way it is utilized. And the Milwaukee Police Department very much so intends to craft a policy with all of the community input we're receiving that ensures there's no misuse of the technology to create a disparity in our community. That was my introduction. I know it wasn't as brief as I thought it would be. But with that, what we would like to share are some of the success stories and ways we have used it in the past. And you may be thinking, I thought you were coming to us ahead of time, like how did you use it in the past? In the past, we have had significant violent cases that would have caused imminent harm to our community that we wanted to solve quickly. And so we asked neighboring jurisdictions to help us out and let us tap into their facial recognition software. And they have done so. However, like a Netflix subscription, it's now limited in use. We've asked for too many cups of sugar from our neighbor. And our partners have said, you know what, we can no longer allow you to use ours, you're going to have to go get your own. And so that's why we are here having this conversation, and that's why we are here equipped with some success stories, because we do want to show the community how this has worked as a useful tool to quickly generate leads when there is the potential for further victimization in our community.
Again, I'm Inspector Paul Lau. I want to thank you guys for inviting us here, allowing us to explain why we would like to utilize this technology. To touch on Heather Huff's point, there are tools that we have besides facial recognition we don't have yet that can be abused, like confidential informants, which is why we have parameters in place on how we handle them. NCIC, National Crime Information Center, access that's running somebody's name. We have parameters on that. And this is how, going forward with facial rec, how we intend to use it would be much like that. Just a tip, like similar to a Crime Stoppers tip. The crimes that we're about to present, they have been solved. Whether or not they would or may not have been solved without the use of facial rec, it's hard to say. Some probably would have been. Some might still be open. But the important part of it is that all the ones we're going to go over are very predatory in nature, where there's exigent circumstances to solve them quickly. You're going to hear about stranger sexual assault. You're going to hear about a homicide and a series of shootings where they're retaliatory, and a string of armed robberies that were targeting taco trucks on the south side of St. Cruz. So without further ado, I'd like to, Captain Hutchinson is going to present our first story.
Good afternoon again. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to explain how we have and intend to use facial recognition software in our investigations. I do have 2 case studies to present this afternoon. Both of them occurred in the city of Milwaukee, and they occurred within 2 days of each other last year in March. We're actually going to go in reverse order as chronologically. The first one occurred on Wednesday, March 6th last year at 6:07 p.m. What you see in the bottom are a series of pictures. Those are still images taken from some surveillance video, and what they depict is a car that's driving past a pedestrian, and the people in the front and back seat of that car opened fire, shooting that pedestrian and killing him. He died at the scene of the incident. The investigation reveals that the suspect car in this incident was at the gas station at the 2400 block in North Buffalo a few minutes prior to this incident occurring. The officers discovered that occupants of that car went inside of the gas station, and that our victim actually was inside that gas station as well, and that there was some type of interaction between our victim and those subjects inside the gas station. Victim walks away from the gas station, and then 6 minutes later, what happens in those photos is what occurred. So we use that those individuals that walked into the gas station, the 2 of those subjects, and we submitted to one of our partners for facial recognition. And within 16 hours of the incident, we determined the potential identity of those subjects. Now again, like we've been saying, it's a lead. We don't know who they are when we get those pictures back, but we have ways of vetting that information and confirming the identification provided to us. And that's what we did in this case. Go forward. So actually one more. So those photos on the bottom are the 2 subjects inside of the gas station, and then ultimately the subjects on top were the ones that were identified in this incident. We confirmed through the use of distinctive tattoos that are visible in the surveillance video, an agent for one of the subjects furthering the identification. We'll show the surveillance video and they say, oh, that's this person. And that's what was done in this. We are able to then within hours find out where those subjects were. One, in fact, was on a bracelet, a GPS bracelet. We were able to confirm that that subject was inside of the gas station and was at the scene of the homicide. With that, we were to determine where that person was when we went to go arrest him. We did so, and at that location was both subjects. as well as the guns that were used during this incident and the car that was used. Further investigation and using another tool, NIBIN, we were able to compare the casings from this incident to an incident that happened actually 5 hours before. These two subjects likely were involved in a shooting that happened on the east side about 5 hours before a homicide, demonstrating the escalating violence that was occurring. There was no saying or telling. We didn't talk to these individuals. They didn't tell us why they did this. We suppose that perhaps it was something that occurred within the gas station or was settling some old beef, but we don't know why. So both of the subjects were charged. Both of them that were put into the media, as you see in the image here. Both of them are pending trial for this matter. The other incident is a first-degree sexual assault that occurred 2 days before the one we just talked about on March 4th, 2024 at the 1500 block of North 28th Street in the garage. On this incident, it's a late report by the victim in this. After this incident occurs, she goes to her home. Her son comes over to her house. He sees that she's despondent, and he asks her what's wrong, and she tells him. And it was a sexual assault. They summon the police who come to the residence. Police officers that come to the residence do a good job of trying to find out where this incident occurred. They found the garage where it occurred based on using Google Maps actually with the victim, not having to take her out on the street. And then get the story. The detectives come and talk to her victim in this, and she tells the story of what occurred. She says that she was cleaning residences for her job, and that she was taking the bus to the area of 50th and Elizabeth. It was raining, so she decided to not go to the employment, was going to go home. She was approached by our suspect in this at the bus stop. He had an umbrella. He offered to walk with her, and she basically tried to walk away from him. He asked her for money, and she said, "Why don't you go ask at the gas station?" He said, "I was just there, and no one would give me any money, so that's why I'm asking you." That was a clue for us later, which you'll find out. The subject at one point pressed a firearm against her, took her to the garage where this incident occurred, and sexually assaulted our victim. He actually took some of her clothing because he knew there would be DNA evidence left behind, and then fled. Again, having told us, the detectives, that the subject was in the gas station, and the description of that person, again with the umbrella, the detailed description she gave, officers were able to go there and then obtain surveillance video from the gas station. That is the surveillance video from the gas station. You see him carrying the umbrella that was described by our victim. He matches very closely to the description that she provided. That photo of that subject was submitted for facial recognition to one of our partners again. And that morning at 6 a.m., so within hours of the report, now we're talking 5 hours after the incident, or actually the reporting of the incident occurred. The incident occurred about 12 hours before. The identification or potential identification came back of that subject you see there. That picture, again, before anything else was done, was shown, the surveillance video still image was then shown to that person's agent. He was on probation and parole for sexual assault. And that agent immediately identified that person as her client. That subject was then located, or we located and arrested him when he met with his agent later that day. The victim was shown a photo array. During a photo array process, she positively identified as the subject as the person who sexually assaulted her, and he was subsequently charged by the DA's office. He did, in fact, plead guilty to this incident, to second-degree sexually assault, and was sentenced to 20 years of incarceration.
Just want to be mindful of time.
Again, that's the
Yeah, and then,
Essentially, we just have listed 13 other crimes that we use the assistance of facial rec to help solve. Again, Southside robberies, escalated behavior, homicide, non-fatal shootings. And the page after that is just to show on the map of the city. We've used it in different areas of the city.
Will this be available to add to the public record, this presentation?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm happy to
So
send
for
that.
those, all right.
I
awesome.
can
Thank you.
collect the paper copies or you can email them as well.
Yeah. So we can upload this into a file.
Yes.
It'll be available for everyone to see.
Yeah. And, we do have another example of some armed robberies of food trucks that happened on the south side, which we have Captain Anderson here to speak to. One of the things of note in that case that I just want to highlight for everyone, since we want to be mindful of time, is that there were, Captain Anderson, 3 potential matches. So there's more than one match that came back.
To be clear, match is not the correct term. There's 3 leads. There 3 leads given, and they did the work on all 3 of the leads to generate the correct suspect.
Correct. David Anderson, ANDERSON, I am part of the Major Crimes Division. I'm in charge of robberies, burglaries, and all the other crimes outside of shootings in the city of Milwaukee. Basically, to make the long story short, is there were 5 related taco truck robberies that were happening on the south side back on April 25th through May 12th. These individuals were masked. They were really protecting their faces. Our detectives went out and did some canvassing. They got a break. They were looking at a lot of video. There's one point in one of the video surveillances where one of the suspects pulled down the mask for a brief time, and that's that still shot that we got. That still shot was sent in. We asked for help. We got some feedback that it came back to 3 or 4 different individuals, and the individual that it really ended up being was the 3rd individual in that line. And when I say that, it comes back with percentages. Off the top of my head, I think the first individual was 97, the next individual was 95, and our actual suspect was only 93 or 94. But our detectives did work on all those individuals and were able to find that one of the individual ended up being was on probation parole, photo rates shown, and probation parole agent, I shouldn't say photo rates, it still was showing, and they were showing that they identified him as the suspect. The key to that thing too is, again, we had 2 to 4 different suspects through all these robberies that were switching in and out. This only led to one individual that we could start targeting, and from there we used our other tools to identify the other 3 suspects. No facial rec was done on any of the other 3 because it just didn't happen. And we identified 4 individuals in those robberies, and they were charged with those robberies.
All right, thank you for that. Thank
Can I
you.
ask a quick question?
Yeah, I'm gonna open it up to some questions. Are we good now we're gonna ask some quick questions?
Sure. I just want to also say quickly, we did bring somebody from our fusion department as well to answer any questions about the actual technical side of facial rec. So we're happy to answer any questions.
I just, about the last thing that you said, I'm unclear whether you're saying that one individual came back as like a 97% match, and that, or you got a lot of matches, and one was 97% and one was 95%, and another was another degree of certitude?
Correct.
Okay, so the facial recognition sort of identified 3 plausible suspects for you?
Yeah, I believe it ended up giving us 4 possible suspects.
And so I heard, what we were saying about bias at the opening of statements, but I think that kind of saying that the concern about bias is misuse, and that would be more my concern, is that if you're using facial recognition and you're getting 97% match, 95% match, whatever percent match on one person, to me it sounds like there's some inherent kind of unreliability in the matching that it's doing. And that's because that software is like notoriously biased.
And that's why we'll never base an arrest off facial recognition alone. It just gives us a lead, and then we'll do our homework from there.
Would that be in the standard operating procedure?
Absolutely.
Yes, 100%. So it is not enough for probable cause or even reasonable suspicion to stop and ask somebody questions if they're a potential match on facial recognition. We recognize that it's, helpful to generate a lead in those cases like, a sexual assault where we don't want another victim, or armed robberies where it was a string of them and they continue to occur. And there was the timeliness about us being able to figure out who it was. So that example, however, shows, yes, they're going to tell you a percentage of certainty. It's not 100%. They're going to give you more than one result as a possibility. It is in then our use, how we utilize that creates a disparity. Because if we were an agency that says go arrest all four, then that's a problem, right? There's a disparity. We're arresting people based on this that isn't constitutional. But we would build parameters within a policy to ensure our use would not become a misuse and lead to an arrest without an actual investigation done by human analysis.
Further questions, commissioners?
I have a question. I appreciate the fact that you are providing this information to us, and obviously the 2 cases that you gave, in addition to, I'm sure, the other 13 that I'll be able to look at once I see the PowerPoint and all of that information, is good. But I'm curious as to what other type of due diligence have you done to ensure that the misuse or disparity that comes from this misuse will and can be addressed? Because facial recognition, especially as it relates to darker complexions, can cause problems. My daughter can unlock my iPhone. And so I'm just very curious as to what type of due diligence, as Commissioner Snell asked, with respect to the, what are you doing relative to SOP, thank you. I'm wondering what type of strategic plan, how long what is the timeline that you're working with to get you to this point? What type of strategic planning have you done? And then what type of operational planning have you done? Because I understand you're building in policies and those types of things, but what have you done?
Sure. So our first step is to have this conversation. So we have an opportunity to acquire 2 licenses for facial recognition technology. Before the chief signed anything, he said, let's have discussions with the community that we serve. So in terms of a plan, our timeline is fluid and it's based upon all of this, right? In as many places and spaces as we can get, we want to have this conversation. Because then our next step is, okay, here's a draft of a policy community. Does it make you feel a little more comfortable with our use? Let's get some feedback on what that looks like in terms of what we put in our policy to make sure there are parameters on our use to not have us misuse this tool. So our timeline, if you're asking for when you want this, it's up to this. It's up to this process. We don't have a set, we want it. I mean, ideally, it's summer, we have a lot of crimes occurring, violent crimes, that we would like to use this as a tool because we have, limited number of detectives, a lot of cases, right? But we're not going to rush into technology that the community isn't fully comfortable with, and our policy will be crafted with this input. And so our next step is, okay, we've heard everybody, despite people disagreeing with it, we may decide to move forward. And in that case, the next step is, here's what we're thinking of a policy, let's have a conversation about that.
The timing is important right now. I mean, public trust, our immigrant community is fearful of everything that's going on. So those conversations, would you be willing, if we were available to facilitate conversations in our communities For example, taking it to Mitchell Street Library and talking to communities there with, obviously, speaking with different languages so that we can have those conversations, and then maybe on the north side, so that maybe, right, and because I think we can see the turnout here today, and I think people want to be involved and in the accountability process, should this go on. But I know that people are here today wanting to stop it from going on, right? But that's a conversation to be had, but appreciate that you're willing to do this, and the chief as well, which I had a brief conversation with the chief, just to have an understanding of the standard operating procedure, that it would have to be corroborative evidence, and there's some other things that we probably need to talk about, and that's sharing the images, because what we're seeing today, our immigrant community will be very fearful of this kind of policy going in, so we're going to have to make assurances all the way around. Other questions?
I have a couple questions. Hi, everyone. My first question is kind of Ms. Huff. Huff? Okay. Thank you. Nice to meet you. I'm Hey, Law. And for the room, my company is her. When you talked about your intention, you did speak to intentionality in coming to this hearing and providing the information and giving us some insight into your process. I do appreciate the case studies that y'all shared, because those are everyday stories to me. Those are not just statistics and just me hearing it in this room. Those are both things that we all collectively experience on the news, but also in our day-to-day life, on Buffalo, in these different areas, on the south side, that we experience these things and see these things occurring. And so not to minimize that, but in the case of specifically here in Milwaukee, where the public trust in the police has been eroded for many years, potentially decades and even longer than that, I do just want to push back on, y'all don't have to present. And I think the reason why I want to push back on that is because it behooves you and it helps y'all to actually protect the community, to have the public trust, and this is a part of what it looks like to build that in a new way, or in a way that starts everyone. I think a lot of public, just in general, that we have a lot of questions, like you stated. Will this technology be used and be shopped around, be given to other third parties? And even when you spoke about that third parties and commercial entities are data mining companies and commercial entities are using this technology, I would wonder then, what is the MPD's purview to be able to protect us as citizens of Milwaukee from that? And from their misuse or from that commercial use, and what does it look like for the impact of these policies to be addressed? And just lastly, I haven't really asked the question yet, I acknowledge. First, what is like even a range or like a ballpark figure for the type of technology that y'all are looking at or have used in the past? Like, what would that cost the city and the department in the ballpark range? Or more rather, what would that cost taxpayers? What is the name of that specific technology if that's not in the slides that you have? I think that would be useful so that we can, as citizens, get more familiar. But I think for me, and I love that you mentioned skin color in regards to technology, but here's my question. I love that you mentioned skin color. My fellow commissioner mentioned skin color in regards to special technology because people don't know this, that even affects air dryers in the bathroom. That even affects hand washing, soap dispensers, and other things. And often, if you are of a darker complexion, you wonder why is this not working for me? In the case that, like my fellow commissioner mentioned, the iPhone and you using the iPhone, Apple technology as a reference, if that can be misleading, if it can think that she is the same as her daughter in identity, how does that impact the usage? And how likely is it, while we know that a lot of offenders reoffend, and that was demonstrated in the case study, what is the likelihood that it is producing the top suspect as someone who maybe has not reoffended? Like, what is that? And furthermore, if it's 91%, 97%, et cetera, as well as intention, how do we know that for sure? How do we know that? Y'all know that because y'all have access to the information when these cases or when these crimes are occurring. But how will we know that it's not producing that for y'all, producing incorrect suspects for y'all? Is kind of my question.
Sure. Okay. There was a lot there, and I wanted to do my best to answer all of the questions and concerns, Commissioner. I want to say, in terms of the cost and the actual software, I'm going to have Captain Simmer come up here and address those, but before that, I just want to address a couple of the things that you mentioned, like what do you do about the 97% of the inaccuracy rate? And that's why we're saying our use would be limited to one person or a secondary if that person's absent or on a different shift. And that use is only, again, to say this is a lead to look into, but it isn't an arrest. It isn't go out and question this person because they're a pretty close match. It is not interfering or doing any police outreach to an individual until we have that human analysis done to determine they're a viable suspect and we have the constitutional right to ask questions. And so we would craft our policy restricting our ability to use it otherwise. And I also just want to say that you are 100% correct about we don't have to have this kind of discussion. But I just want to tell you, like, I'm human sometimes. I get really defensive because people are like, oh, the police are doing bad things, and I get it. We're building trust, and it's years in the making. But I sometimes see the good that we're doing and, like, really trying to do that. And I say that I shouldn't have started like that, and I apologize. It's sometimes it's, you know, a defense mechanism. So to that, I will say you are 100% correct. We should be doing that, and it isn't like, oh, we should get some kudos for doing that. So that's,
thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you. And it was less about it was less about you saying it.
I know.
And I actually appreciate you saying it because that lets us know exactly how the MPD and y'all leadership is feeling, and even you being transparent and saying that y'all feel that sometimes y'all are in a position to be defensive. But in the case that y'all are the stewards, our safety keepers, our protectors, we can't afford for y'all to be defensive with community. I think that the last thing I'll say, and then I'll pass it to the next speakers, but it's just that when you say that it will not be used for a conviction for an arrest, I think that takes us again back to trust. How do we know and ensure that? And then lastly, just that my concern as an organizer, and I get that, I get that the timing, I get that it takes years and years to build a thing like trust, to build trust in community. But my issue as a community advocate is for that person that's in reentry, for that person that is struggling, that has committed a crime, that is trying to turn their life around, how will them being labeled a new first suspect, how will that impact them in their journey? Is that something that maybe will push them over the edge to recidivism? Is that something that will alter their journey? And so that's where I think that's something for me.
I know we're pressed for time.
Yeah, I know, but you had, I thought you had someone that was going to answer a question.
About the cost.
He's a later speaker, I think.
What's that?
I think he has like a specific slide to speak.
No.
Oh,
No.
No, I was just asking.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Cost for the taxpayer.
Yeah.
We still want to leave that out.
We'll talk about it. The company is Biometrica, that we're looking into. We're not in any agreement with them yet.
Right.
The offer they gave us is 2 free licenses. In exchange, they will use our Milwaukee Police booking data, and that will be the comparisons.
Milwaukee Police
Department
data.
or booking, yeah, the photographs. What will they do with those photographs? What will Biometrica do with that data? They will have access to that. They will have access to that data. We will submit, like when a crime occurs, we'll submit the photos we pulled from surveillance camera of the crime and submit it to them, and they will vet it for comparison.
So they could use it in other jurisdictions, is that what you're saying?
That's
If other jurisdictions have licenses?
I think it feeds the database. Kind of like I feel like that's how
Okay.
AI works. It's like puts more data into their database.
I just wanted to acknowledge there in the chat, it's been requested that you say your name, identify who you are, for people who are online, to everyone that speaks today. And we do have a commissioner alerting us that we are way over time.
We are, I know we have, well, what's important here is they're the ones that are going to perhaps implement this technology. So we want to ask them the specific questions while we have an opportunity, and commissioners having the opportunity to ask those questions that are very necessary, I think, too. Please, did you have an answer for part of this?
Yeah, hi. Phil Simmert. I'm the commander of the Fusion Division. So this has been actually quite a lengthy process. We're looking at over 2 years where we've done research. We specifically landed on Biometrica because of their focus on privacy. So the way that it works, and I'll kind of explain how the data is transferred. So they are not a facial recognition company, they're a data company. So we would provide a photo from a crime that occurred from a surveillance photo. They then take that data, and it gets transferred into, they refer to it as a black box. So they have, NIST is kind of the federal organization that has oversight on reliability of data. So they stress that they are NIST approved. They don't touch the data, they don't store the data. Once it goes into their system and gets transferred, it doesn't get shared. We intentionally chose this company because there are facial recognition companies that literally will take faces from an iPhone and they will purchase public data. We were intentional that we don't want to be in that business. The only data that we are giving them are jail records. It's no publicly available data, and I think that's important to highlight.
Thank you.
A couple of things I want to address in the chat. That we'll note the questions that are coming into the chat, and if MPD would be willing to then take those questions offline, and then we'll hopefully be able to answer some of the questions coming into the chat.
I can put them into a list and send them to you.
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely. We're happy to provide that response that you can place in your file or
In the record. Okay, thank you.
I certainly don't want to steal time from like public comment or question. And I think what I'm going to say is brief and pointed, I hope. Whoa! Wow, okay. Coming back up. I guess what I've heard you describe is that you have a lot of tools in your tool belt, and this is another tool that you would like to have. And so I guess the thing that I, one, caution and then also question is if it's effective enough to be worth it, and you wouldn't be sitting here if you didn't think it was. And I'm just curious if you've had conversations with like the district attorney's office and if they're supportive of it. Because to me, I think like having a 97% match and a 95% match and a 94% match, like that undermines a case to me, right? And I get that you're saying it's not just based on that one thing, and there are other things that you're doing to substantiate it, but I think that is going to be an issue. Now, I don't know what it's looked like in other jurisdictions where they use this data and, like how defense attorneys are combating that if they are. But I think that that's like one point to keep in mind. And then the other tangential point is that, harm versus value. Like some of these, everyone that you've said is someone who you're aware of so far. I mean, like not aware of that they did the particular thing, but is there not a way to circulate a photo in databases that you like already have access to, or send it to every parole board member that's more insular, that doesn't implicate the community so hard? Because no one's going to argue with you caught a murderer as a result of having used facial recognition. Like no one can combat that you stopped a person who's, I guess, like a serial sex assaulter through this data. Like those are things that the community wants to have happen, but there are other people in the community that then this will like naturally affect. And I hear that you're saying it's just two people with two licenses, but it's never just two people with two licenses, I mean, and maybe you don't know, but
I will say for our department, it truly is. We have a number of different things that are very limited in its use. We have systems, for instance, to look up people's license plates. It's monitored all the time. And we've had instances where we've disciplined individuals because they've looked up a relative, right? Mm-hmm. And not regularly, but for us, the integrity of our data is so important, and we do very much limit uses. So when we say it's two people, it really is, and there will be parameters in place to ensure that the...
I think it's two people until there's like a federal subpoena for that information, or it's two people until, you know what I mean, like the right person with the right agenda and the right amount of power then also gets access to it.
I think that's why we would have a very airtight policy. We already have policies to address who can access our systems and technology, and that is super limited. And one other thing you said about the district attorney and preventing harm. So one, the way we intend to use this, there will not be harm, because those individuals that are a match, that aren't a suspect, they are not, nothing will ever happen to them. Captain Hutchinson can speak to our relationship with the district attorney's office and to these particular cases. But that's another actual prevention tool for misuse is the district attorney's office, because they have to have enough to charge a case, and they would never even accept a case off of facial recognition technology.
Right, and then, again, James Hutchinson, captain of the homicide division. My worst nightmare is that we all arrest the wrong person in any of our cases. We want the right person to be held accountable for the actions. And that's just the first step in the judicial process, right? It's a police reasonable suspicion, probable cause. But the district attorney's office has that beyond a reasonable doubt where they don't want us to bring anybody to them that they can't prove in court beyond a reasonable doubt. So we have to put steps into place that we ensure that doesn't happen. Facial recognition, getting the wrong person. Yes, again, we're going to have a series of leads in there, and those leads are going to be, I don't know what that percentage is based on when we get those back and solve the company. But we put measures in place to even we're not going to take that, for instance, we would not take those 4 or 6 or whatever the number is and show that group of people to the victim in the case and say which one of these people is the one that did this. That would never be a thing. We would take that next step that would give us that either reasonable suspicion or probable cause beyond what we're presented by the company.
Have you had a conversation with the district attorney?
What's that?
I think the commissioner was asking, have you had a conversation?
Specifically with the district attorney about facial
office, yes.
Right. Well, they're so I have not talked to District Attorney Laverne specifically about this, if that's the question. But I can tell you that in the process, we do talk to assistant district attorneys, and they're aware of our use of this. It's documented in our reports, and they're aware of the way we use it for investigation.
I mean, I guess the other side of that is, like, is the defendant aware of the use of it, and like, do they have access to the fact that 4 other people were plausibly identified?
It's all discoverable when it gets turned over with the reports.
And we're happy to have a formal conversation with Kent about this topic. It's really important to continue that conversation. We're in contact all the time. There's an assumption that, we all know where we stand, but I'm happy to formalize that and sit down with the district attorney and say, where do you stand?
Thank you for being here today. We appreciate your time, and then we'll move on to the next speakers. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll be in touch and continue this conversation. Thank you. Again, apologies for the time. Just a lot of information here. We have the opportunity to speak with the individuals who potentially will be implementing this technology. And it's important to have these conversations, but this conversation will not end. We will continue this and hopefully in the community. All right, we'll get FPC up, if we could, please. Just state your name and your role, title, in the presentation, please. FPC is Fire and Police Commission. There are a lot of letters out there. So thank you for joining us today. And as I mentioned at the beginning in the statement, we're interested in that policy making and the accountability part that we just heard from MPD, that you have a role there. So oversight, for example. So please introduce yourself and start the conversation.
Thank you very much for having us here. So good evening. My name is Leon Todd. I'm the Executive Director of the Fire and Police Commission.
I'm Bruce Spencer. I'm one of the commissioners. Chrissy Fong. I'm one of the commissioners. My pronouns are she, they.
And if it's okay with the commission, what I would propose is I'll give a brief overview of some of the procedure, the background on the Fire and Police Commission, what powers and duties it does have and doesn't have, particularly in this space related to facial recognition technology. And then I'll turn it over to the commissioners who can either elaborate on what I've said or what I anticipate is that they'll speak to their substantive opinion on this issue. Okay. All right. Very good. So for those that are not familiar with the Fire and Police Commission, it is the oversight agency that has jurisdiction over Milwaukee's 3 public safety departments, Milwaukee Police Department, the Fire Department, and now the new Department of Emergency Communications. The FPC board is comprised of 9 part-time commissioners, and then they're supported in their work by a full-time staff of 27 city employees whom I manage as the Commission's executive director. And I like to think of the Fire and Police Commission as having 2 broad areas of responsibilities or duties. One is oversight, and then the second is recruiting, testing, and hiring for the public safety department. So what we're talking about this evening is in the oversight basket or bucket. And the Commission does have a broad range of responsibilities and powers. It has, for example, it has a citizen complaint program where we have our own investigators that can investigate complaints of misconduct, and we can, based on what's found in those, we can direct non-disciplinary corrective actions like counseling or policy training, or in certain appropriate circumstances, actual form of discipline. In addition, the commissioners have the ability to hear disciplinary appeals from members who are recipients of significant discipline. The Fire and Police Commission also has an audit unit that can conduct audits and reviews of various operational areas of the Public Safety Department. It has the authority to inspect any property or review any records of the department. That said, I do want to be clear that the Commission is an oversight agency. It does not run the operations, in particular it does not run the day-to-day operations of the department, and it doesn't micromanage the department. That authority rightly falls with the chiefs of the department and then their executive command staff. The other thing I want to explain is that while the Commission does have a broad range of duties and powers, its powers are not unlimited. So one thing I want to focus on is the policy-making authority of the Fire and Police Commission. Historically, that was one of the oversight powers that the Fire and Police Commission had. They had the power to approve standard operating procedures that the department recommended or created, that they wanted to recommend to the Fire and Police Commission board, or they could create their own standard operating procedures. One example of that was a policy related to video release. So if there was a critical incident and there was body-worn camera or squad camera footage, the Commission established its own policy that said that that had to be released to the public within 15 days, and then within 48 hours, the family members have to be given an opportunity to do that in certain circumstances. In 2023, that policy-making authority was transferred pursuant to Wisconsin Act 12, which is now state law. That was made by the Wisconsin legislature. That power was transferred from the Fire and Police Commission to the chiefs of the respective departments. So now the chiefs can, on their own, without FPC approval, can create standard operating procedures or other policies. Their powers are not unlimited in that respect, however. The Milwaukee Common Council now has the power to either amend or suspend policies based on a 2/3 vote. The Fire and Police Commission, after Act 12, also amended its internal board rules to require that the police department give notice of any new or amended standard operating procedure to the board within 48 hours, and also 30 days before the effective date of that policy. And so what that does is it allows the Fire and Police Commission to have a communication file in a public meeting where the department has to explain the new policies or changes to policies. The commissioners can hear public comment, ask questions, and ultimately they can make recommendations to the chief for potential changes. If the chief, in his discretion, plans to make those changes, then the board can also make a recommendation to the Common Council to suspend or amend those policies. That a formal recommendation like that has not happened, but there have been informal recommendations, not only amongst the commissioners, but amongst myself and MPD staff, that has resulted in changes to policy. I don't believe it's been as significant or a policy that has generated the significant amount of public interest that this item has, but nevertheless, that is something that the FPC still has that soft power to do. I want to stop there so I don't go on too long and turn it over to police commissioners.
Thanks, Lee. So Bree Spencer, she, her, as Lee said, it's a very part-time gig, being a fire and police commissioner, so I think it's relevant to share that my regular job, my 9-to-5 job, is with a civil rights organization, a national board, the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and I work with many people in the criminal justice civil rights space, in particular, spend a fair amount of time talking with and working with folks who work specifically on policing technology. So I have a few remarks. I'm going to try to go quickly because I do really want to hear what the community has to say. So I'm going to get going. And if I'm going too fast, stop me. It's been documented by MIT, Georgetown Center for Privacy and Technology, the ACLU, and many others that the error rates in facial recognition technology and the related consequences are far higher for women and people with darker skin. I'm going to call it FRT. I have to say it the whole time. It's going to get all caught up in my mouth.
So FRT has too high a misidentification rate for it to be used by law enforcement, period. And I would say that anywhere in the United States. For that reason, using it is not moral, it's not practical, and it's not evidence-based. In particular, the bias that exists within FRT is identical to the type of bias that we see repeated over and over again in our criminal legal system. And that makes it a very dangerous combination in particular. The city of Milwaukee and MPD specifically have gotten into a lot of legal and financial trouble for this type of bias. That's why we have the call and settlement agreement, for example. So piling on with a technology that has the same bias problem is a terrible idea. Again,
can you say that settlement?
The Collins settlement agreement? Yeah. Okay, so the kinds of rigorous oversight and management of FRT that's recommended by the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. And they have a report that came out September 2024. It's like 194 pages long. It's a lot, but it's worthwhile. What they name as like is sort of the necessary and bare minimum to even consider the use of FRT, and none of it is in place. In particular, regarding regulatory and privacy concerns, I just want to hop over really quickly to read briefly from this. So this is from the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights report. As of the writing of this report, again, September 2024, there are no laws that expressly regulate the use of FRT or other AI by the federal government, and no constitutional provisions governing its use. There are also no federal regulations specifically protecting individual civil rights in the course of federal government use of FRT or other AI technology, and no provisions requiring regular oversight of the government use of such technologies. One more paragraph. Okay, one significant concern regarding the usage of FRT centers on privacy. FRT's potential for surveillance and covert use, paired with the widespread availability of personal information that can be associated with facial image, implicates privacy concerns. The lack of transparency and regulation raises privacy concerns due to the technology's collection and storage of personal and biometric information. Images of faces, as with other biometric systems, can be used for surveillance and purposes without a person's knowledge or consent. Okay, so then quickly, for real this time, quickly. Accessing the tech by turning over a huge photo array of Milwaukeeans to a tech company is a wild choice, and one that will compromise the progress that has been made, in fact, towards building community police trust. I also want to flag there's frequent issues on the court side with using biometric technology, where defendants are told regularly that they cannot access through discovery, like the algorithms that were used to identify them or other things. They're often told that it's proprietary data because they're private vendor companies. I worry about that here. And I think also I just want to flag, I think it is very appropriate to be concerned about local surveillance being tapped through government, like federal government overreach right now. I want to give a quick example, which is the 287G program, which is local departments, police departments, sheriff departments can have an agreement to work with ICE in certain ways. And in December of 2024, there were about 133 of those agreements.
In Milwaukee?
No, in the country. And as of 4 p.m. yesterday, there are 700, and there are 69 pending. So when I say it is rapid, like that kind of government overreach, federal government overreach into local law enforcement spaces is rapidly expanding, I really mean it. And then finally, I just want to say it's really frustrating for me as somebody who's worked for a really long time around law enforcement issues and civil rights. In the universe of police tech, that when a new tech is desirable to a department, the costs associated with that tech, and I'm talking about every kind of cost, the financial costs, the privacy costs, the errors, the lack of regulation, and any potential misuse are borne by the community. And as a result, the community should be, if not, I would argue, the principal decider in what kind of technology is being used in this very industry.
Would you be willing to summarize your statements just with some bullet points, and also provide the links with the
Oh, yeah.
especially, yeah.
I can email the report.
We would love to have that information for the record.
Even from my government account, I'll do it.
Absolutely.
We want your narration.
Yeah. A little bit about bullet points.
How you wrote it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not, I don't think we should do it, and that's my personal opinion. I suspect the community is saying the same thing based on people that came and spoke at the Fire and Police Commission, but I think the community should be a principal decider here, one. And two, I have very serious concerns along many different lines that to me render the decision to use facial recognition technology moving kind of against the right moral position, against the right practical position, and against others.
Will FPC make a recommendation that you're aware of?
I don't think we've talked about that as a commission.
Yeah, that's unknown at this point.
Okay.
Can I, one clarifying question on the last thing you said about the local police department's contract with ICE? You said that increase happened within what time frame?
6 months. Well, really since the end of January.
Thank you.
Of 2025.
Thank you. For the transcript, again, my name is Chrissy Fung. My pronouns are she, they. I will also try to be brief because I can tell that there are so many people that took time out of their day to come here. It is notable to me that MPD talked about being willing to hear from the community. Over the weekend, we had 2 community meetings on Chief Norman's reappointment. No one at any of those meetings asked for facial recognition technology. And these were not rooms full of abolitionists. Like some people asked for beat cops back, but they did not ask for FRT. So in my perspective as a commissioner, I'm here to talk to you about oversight. As we've recently found, MPD has been using facial recognition technology on the faces of Milwaukeeans for years without being transparent with the public or with the MPC, because there's no standard operating procedure to provide guidelines around their process. Relying on MPD to follow their own gentleman's agreements and internal process is just not how oversight works. MPD did not choose to be transparent about using FRT until they were forced to because Netflix cracked down on their password sharing. And I want to repeat that. MPD was not transparent about their use of FRT, and in doing so, did not allow Fire and Police Commission oversight.
Can you elaborate specifically on that and the intersection on Netflix?
Sure. So I'm referencing, I guess, Chief of Staff Heather Huff's comments alluding to the fact that they were essentially using like password sharing to gain access to this technology. And so it is not, unfortunately, out of the goodness of their hearts that they come to us to ask to talk about these licenses, but essentially because they can no longer keep doing what they were already doing in secret without talking to
with
the
other
public.
local jurisdictions.
And without talking.
Sharing.
Yes.
Because of a commercial entity policy.
It sounds like it, although I'm not privy to like the actual communications of them saying that they can't do licensing.
We should have that on the record. Yeah. Refer to that. Other local jurisdictions, and they were using their ability to access the technology. Yeah, right. So we do that.
Because of the nature of the proposal, Chief Norman himself told us this weekend at one of his reappointment community meetings that there is no way to guarantee the safety of the data and faces of Milwaukeeans. As my fellow commissioner said, this data is going to a third-party company that we have no oversight with, and using algorithms that we have no insight into because they are proprietary. In particular, in this federal landscape, when ICE is making unprecedented deals with the IRS, when the federal government is clearly able to reach into the nooks and crannies of local government, even if I take MPD at their word that they have the best of intentions, we have no idea what happens with this private company, and we have no control over the feds. MPD's proposal is to trade 2.5 million mugshots in exchange for this license, which, by the way, includes my mugshot. I believe that there are serious legal concerns that have not yet played out in the courts and that would open us up to significant lawsuits. Unfortunately, I'm a little too busy to go to law school, but I would posit that there is a legal difference between MPD's ownership of a mugshot as a photograph and MPD selling or trading a mugshot as a person's personal biometric data. And especially this is concerning given that half of these mugshots may be of people who have not legally been convicted of a crime. I cannot help but wonder if the reason Biometrica is so thirsty to trade 2.5 million quote-unquote jail records or mugshots in exchange for free access to this technology is that they assume that those jail records are black faces, and they clearly need more black faces to train their inaccurate algorithm. But we don't need to let them get those black faces from the wall. I asked at the April 17th meeting for MPD to provide data on the races of the faces that they've been using this technology on so far, and I have not gotten an answer. Honestly, I feel fairly certain, and this is my guess, that they are mostly black. But police use of this technology is dangerous for every marginalized group in this environment. For our trans siblings seeking gender-affirming care, for immigrants, for sex workers, for people seeking reproductive health care. MPD has said themselves that they're perfectly capable of solving these crimes without the use of facial recognition technology. So at this moment in history, with the lack of oversight that we have both at the Fire and Police Commission, with the lack of our ability to have oversight into a third-party company, and with the way that MPD has honestly betrayed our trust when it comes to facial recognition technology, I'm forced to oppose the use of FRT. MPD will tell you that a tool is a tool, and I get it. From their perspective, how could they turn down this opportunity to get free swag out of our mugshot? So it is up to us, commissioners of the ERC, commissioners of the FPC, and alders to make sure that we're representing the interests of the public and to do what we need to do to guide this decision. No technology or tool is an inevitability, and just because it's being used in other places doesn't mean we have to trade the faces of Black Milwaukeeans for it. It is clear to me that in this case and in this moment in history, the risks simply outweigh the benefits. So I oppose MPD's use of FRT.
Thank you. Do you expect, have you had any assurances from MPD that you would be involved in that standard operating procedure?
They would be required to, at a minimum, present it in a public meeting before the Fire and Police Commission before it goes into effect. And that would come with public comment. The commissioners would be able to ask questions, make recommendations. So at a minimum, that would happen.
What's a typical timeline for that?
Well, it depends when they have a draft ready and are ready to bring that forward. But they would be required to give it to. Send it to me. I would circulate it to the commissioners at minimum within 48 hours after it is proposed standard operating procedure. And then the commission likely would hear that next meeting. The Fire and Police Commission, that is. The commission meets on the first and third Thursdays of each month.
One quick question, and then I'll turn it over. Would you be willing to co-facilitate two public hearings with the Equal Rights Commission and the FPC, and we both hear the public in the community, not here, City Hall, but in the neighborhoods? Would you be willing to do that? Is that possible?
That is something that I would have to speak to the chair of the FPC board about.
Happy to have that conversation, so I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
In the interest of time,
I have a quick kind of technical question, and I suppose this comes back to Ms. Hoff's initial comment that she retracted, but it's put it top of mind for me, is that the FPC my understanding is that if you get the SOP and you really, really don't like the SOP, you can recommend to the Common Council that they don't permit it. Is that accurate?
The FPC board, yes.
Okay, so that oversight capability still remains.
It's, they can give recommendations, but they can't directly change the policy.
So they can recommend to the Common Council,
yes,
who then can say no as well.
By a 2/3 vote, they can amend or suspend the policy.
And so if people feel very passionately, perhaps they should be contacting their older person about this issue.
I would just, I would say that is the case because the state law allows for Common Council to override the decision, and you're absolutely right. And I think if we're out of the community
and we co-facilitate some hearings, we may have the opportunity to obviously make recommendations to Common Council and continue that dialogue with those decision makers, and including, I would say the administration as well, provide that kind of information. But yes, every individual, however you stand with this, should be communicating with your Common Council members, because that's important. Speaking of that, we have a member in the present, so welcome, Alderwoman Moore. We appreciate you being here. Appreciate your engagement too with this process. Yeah, is that all for now for the FPC? Well, thank you very much for being here and presenting, and we look forward to perhaps working together.
Thank you. We appreciate y'all.
Well, we'll now move into public testimony. We have in person in order of as they signed up. And we also ask you if you're willing to summarize your testimony and present that as a file. That would be important because it would be a matter of the public record. All of this public record, we're going to be gathering and summarizing and providing this information to our elected officials because ultimately they want to see this information. We've had other members of the Common Council also inquire about the information. They've had other meetings, but they're looking forward to seeing what is presented here today. So Amanda Merkway, and I apologize if I'm making any mistakes on names. Please help me with that.
No, you pronounced it perfectly.
And please introduce if you're representing an organization and your role. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Amanda Merkway. I am the Advocacy Director for the ACLU of Wisconsin, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify in opposition to the direct or indirect use of facial recognition technology by the Milwaukee Police Department. As has been mentioned, at this point in time, the proliferation and use of surveillance tech by MPD or any law enforcement agency should give everyone pause. We're already seeing how surveillance tech is being weaponized in real time. Data gathered from facial recognition, automated license plate readers, artificial intelligence, and other surveillance tools are being used to target and detain individuals. DHS is rapidly expanding its surveillance interface in local communities for immigration enforcement. Surveillance is being used to monitor and prosecute political protesters, people seeking reproductive health care, LGBTQ individuals, and doctors trying to provide care. These are not projections, they are present-day realities carried out by bad actors in the federal government and other local jurisdictions. Several specific examples are detailed in our written testimony. I have a whole lot of copies, also a copy of the National ACLU's comments to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. If anyone in the room would like a copy.
Yeah, I'll grab some right now.
Perfect. Also, as we heard from MPD's testimony, the feds already use FRT, but do the feds already have direct access to 2.5 million MPD mugshots and voting records? While local law enforcement agencies, including MPD, may have good intentions, history reminds us how quickly larger systems can override those intentions. Data collected in Milwaukee does not stay in Milwaukee. Once our data enters a federal pipeline or a database connected to surveillance tools in the private sector, it can be accessed, shared, and used in ways we cannot predict or stop. As has been mentioned, we know that facial recognition automates discrimination. FRT consistently shows racial and gender biases that persist despite improvements in algorithm training data. I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about that from the public tonight. FRT has led to wrongful arrests of many individuals across the country, as outlined in our written comments. Nearly every one of those people wrongfully arrested are Black. Across the country, people often omit, or police often omit, material information about FRT use from search and arrest warrant applications to judges, sometimes completely concealing the fact that their reliance on FRT is part of the investigation. Inadequate disclosures continue post-arrest, where prosecutors routinely resist turning over adequate information about FRT use as part of their pretrial disclosure obligations under Brady and other doctrines. In Milwaukee, I have heard cases, in some cases, where the use of FRT was never disclosed in discovery. And in other cases, attempts to get information about FRT algorithms were blocked because, again, that information is proprietary. Speaking of transparency, I want to emphasize that it is ludicrous that MPD has been using FRT from neighboring police agencies for 2 to 3 years without transparency and despite no local policy in place. We don't know the extent of, we don't know which agencies and the complete list. There were a couple mentioned, but there may be more. Finally, what MPD is proposing, exchanging 2.5 million jail records for 2 free Biometrica licenses, one for MPD and one for the Fusion Center. To be clear, the premise of Fusion Centers is to share real-time information with federal law enforcement and other jurisdictions. The company says, don't worry, we use a third-party facial recognition service to match images, it's not our algorithm. They describe themselves as a big data company rather than a biometrics provider. That makes me more concerned. Biometrica operates the UMBRA database, which stands for Unique Mission to Build Records and Arrests. Quote, a real-time, multi-jurisdictional database providing search capabilities against criminal records for lawful investigations and security purposes. A Biometrica contract signed by police in another jurisdiction requires police to provide Biometrica with continued direct access to historical and real-time booking and warrant data. That's concerning when another one of Biometrica's products, called eMotive, is a database system for organizations, private entities, to monitor employees or individuals continuously, notifying them by an encrypted alert upon potential arrests.
Can you say that one more time and explain what that is?
Sure. So a lot of this is from Biometrica's website, and I'm not sure exactly how the system works, but my inference is that they have the same company that is trying to get MPD to sign this contract as a separate product that they sell to private entities called eMotive, E-M-O-T-I-V-E, which, quote from their website, is a database system for organizations to monitor employees or individuals continuously, notifying them via encrypted alert upon potential arrests. So my guess, but I'm not sure, is we feed our faces, 2.5 million faces from the Milwaukee community, into this UMBRA database that is then accessible to all the other jurisdictions that are getting their 2 free licenses. Then there are folks who maybe purchase other products are then able to know if someone is booked into a particular jail.
I'm sorry.
No.
The eMotive example as an example of the scope of what Biometrica does already.
Correct.
You said that they were surveilling people until they were found to be arrested and surveilling employees until they were found to be arrested somewhere else?
So I think my understanding is if I'm a company and I want to monitor my employees so that if an employee of mine is arrested and I get an automatic notification of that.
Let your employer know that you were arrested automatically.
So I assume that there's some database, maybe UMBRA, that is kind of feeding into these systems that can provide real-time updates to whoever is subscribing to that product. Again, I'm not positive that it is the UMBRA database, but I don't know how else they would acquire that data.
Thank you.
As has been mentioned, jailer booking records include a whole lot of people who were never charged with a crime, had their case dismissed, or were acquitted. We cannot be so naive to believe that trading 2.5 million faces doesn't make someone an obscene profit. So basically, Wisconsin is also calling on Milwaukee leaders to say no to FRT in Milwaukee, to ban the practice full stop, and also to make sure that for every surveillance technology that is used in the city, of which there are many, that there is community control and input and transparency in the decision making about whether to continue using that technology.
Thank you. Amanda Norquist, we appreciate it. Katie Lillard, is that correct? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Thank you.
Y'all should take one of Amanda's information packets to just pass them down the road.
Well, it's two parts, by the way. One is the testimony and one's the package. So, Amanda, we may need a few more up here.
Sure.
Yeah, because I split them up. I'm sorry. I apologize. Katie, please introduce yourself.
Thank you for having me here. My name is Katie Willers. My pronouns are she, her. I am a responsible tech and AI governance advisor and AI system auditor. On April 17th, I provided public comment to the WhiteFolks Commission meeting, and I stated that I was against the use of this technology for reasons based on privacy and overreach of government. Due to time limitations, I did not discuss the potential for disparate impact on racialized and marginalized community members, and I expected that many others would give public comments to the same, and they did unanimously, emphatically, and compellingly. And they also noted that we ought to be investing in our communities rather than in technology. And I stand by both those stances today. In my opinion, that we should not have FRT for the Milwaukee Police Department. So today I'm going to comment from another angle in the spirit of protect and serve, and with the assumption that we all share and agree that technology should be deployed securely and responsibly in our community. So here are a few components of how this proposal should be approached and a few tools to use in the process. And I want to note that the presentations that I've heard so far have been quite vague in their answers, and this is not enough. We cannot say that bias arises from how something is used. Bias comes from historical data, comes from the choice of data used to train a model, comes from the parameters used to tune a model, and so on. This can be investigated very rigorously by technical experts, and that is what this community is owed. Furthermore, to say that the Packers use facial technology, therefore the police department should as well, is a statement. From an auditing perspective, when we audit a system, we look at the scope, nature, purpose, and context of that system. So that system that the sports team might be using is a completely different system, completely different context, and that must be considered on its own. And I think a lot of the people here are probably here because they recognize, even if they don't have quite the words for it, that employing facial recognition technology is, this is a socio-technical system, meaning that it learns from our society, it takes in data from people, it changes, and then it changes our society as well. And so folks here are considering what is the systemic, social impact of technology like this, and we are not going to unanimously agree that this should be changing our lives, especially based on other contexts where people consent, like when they're using Face ID. So these, the questions I'm going to pose next are coming from a framework from a nonprofit, auditing nonprofit called For Humanity. You'll see that in each question there is a risk inherent that the framework wants to address. So this should be answered, and the process is documented thoroughly and completely by the Milwaukee Police Department before the community can possibly get to a yes. So I'm going to read through a non-exhaustive list of that now. First is the agreement. What is the exact data that MPD would be trading for the software license, and what is the term of the license agreement? When it ends, are they going to be continuing to trade Milwaukee data? Scope, nature, context, and purpose. This is a technical framework for understanding the system components and how it will be used. From a community perspective, we also need a layman's version that explains this within our actual community, with roles, responsibilities, and accountability clearly defined and assigned. Stakeholder engagement. We've had a few of these meetings, but this also needs to be formalized into a committee of diverse perspectives, considering protected demographics as well as education, career, neighborhood, and other relevant identities. This committee gives feedback directly to the ethics committee. This must be composed of people specifically trained in philosophy, ethics, human rights, and AI systems. The ethics committee uses tools such as a risk or impact assessment, fundamental rights impact assessment, and disparate impact assessment to safeguard human rights. Provider due diligence. The provider of the system, in this case Biometrica, should provide comprehensive and satisfactory answers to the questions. These are not exhaustive. What data was used to train your system? Who owns the data? How is it used when MPD provides input during the data, during use of the system? How was the model tested for accuracy, reliability, and robustness? How and when is the model tested for drift? How is the model and system secured from cyber threats? What is drift? Model drift, so that might mean that the community changes in some relevant way, and that data is not reflected in the model. So now,
or something.
Essentially, it means that the output is no longer relevant in some way, no longer accurate. So they might say this was 97% accurate when we tested it, but this has to be continued to be tested to ensure that it is in alignment with how we're using the system.
Algorithmic drift.
Yes, and I have the answer on questions later.
So how is the model and the system secured from cyber threats? What ethical choices were made during the design and development of the system? And what ethical and diverse input was used to inform these choices? And by the way, if this company does align with the NIST AI risk management framework, they can publicly talk about that. And also they can give transparency to things like accuracy, reliability, robustness, etc., while still protecting their IP. Human oversight, where is the human in the loop? How are they trained? What are they trained on and who provides the training? How are they held accountable? What are redress avenues for targets of the system? Personal data and privacy. What does MPD do with the data? How can they use the data? For how long is it retained? Can it be linked to other personal data, whether publicly or privately obtained? How do people consent to use? How are people notified that they are subject to active system use? How do people know that the data has been collected? How do people know how their data is being used? How does the MPD secure the system from physical and cyber threats? What AI literacy is provided to MPD? Who does the training? What does it cover? And how is effectiveness evaluated? Interpretability and explainability. Can we trace the inputs to the outputs? How can we interrogate the output? What are the variables and features used in an algorithm? Can the system communicate uncertainty or confidence in its outputs? Monitoring incident response. Who monitors the system for drift, accuracy, reliability, robustness? What is their background and training for the role, and how are they held accountable? How are incidents monitored and logged? How is this information provided publicly? What are the systems and processes to respond to incidents? What is civilian recourse for incidents? Decommissioning. How will it be determined that the system does not meet ethical and or performance metrics required by the community and the ethics committee? What metrics will be used? Who decides the metrics? Who monitors the metrics? How will satisfactory performance be communicated regularly to the community? When and how will the community be able to give feedback on the continued use or the change of the metrics? How often will fundamental rights and disparate impact be measured? How will the system be fully and transparently decommissioned if it does not meet metrics and maintain community approval? Heather Huff, Chief of Staff for MPD, is quoted as saying, "We desire to keep everyone safe, and we recognize a very delicate balance between advancements in technology and ensuring these departments do not violate the rights of those in this diverse community of interest that we serve." But she also wanted the public to know, including today, that MPD was under no obligation to inform Milwaukee residents it was considering adopting the technology, but decided to bring it forward to hear how the community felt. While it may not be legally required to inform Milwaukee residents about this technology, it's an ethical imperative, not a favor. In order to avoid violating rights of the community and responsibly deploying technology, MPD is likewise ethically compelled to transparency, thoroughness, and due diligence in the processes I've outlined above. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Ron, James.
Did you want to send it to me?
Ma'am, can you submit a file if you have comments for the record? Where would you send
We
it?
will send it at ERC@milwaukee.gov.
ERC@milwaukee.gov. Thank you so much.
I'd just like to say I appreciate the commission not rushing public comment here and recognizing the importance of the people having just as much, if not more, time than the police. So thank you for that. The Milwaukee Police Department is a chronic violator of people's basic constitutional and human rights. I don't know a single person in this city that trusts the police. So the last thing Milwaukee needs to do is hand this department a tool that creates even greater opportunity to harm the people of this city. Consider that their entire argument, the MPD's argument here, is that they don't have to consider what city residents want as it relates to surveillance, and that we should just trust them with this tech because they promise they won't use it. Beyond being an awfully authoritarian thing to say, it exposes the truth. And that truth is that the MPD doesn't care what residents think about this or any other subject, but that they recognize the importance of pretending to listen while they carry on as they see fit. With that being said, I do want to go over a point that a couple people have already mentioned, but I think needs to be hammered home. This is not free. The cost is 2.5 million mugshots of residents, non-residents, whatever. Anybody who's been through the system here in Milwaukee. 2.5 million human beings. Human beings, maybe half of which or more, were never convicted of a crime. This includes people who were wrongfully arrested or accused, or just anyone that was ever booked into their custody. While I was writing this, I thought,
That also includes people who have already been victimized by this department, people who have been beaten by the police, people who have been wrongfully accused by the police. This is your biological data, my biological data, everyone's biological data, and it is being sold to a private company without your consent, also that they can expand their surveillance network. So, just to reiterate, let's take a moment to consider who that might include. That could be protesters, that could be teachers, politicians, right? A friend of mine, a man named Ryan Clancy, who was beaten by Milwaukee Police Department in 2020 and had to settle a lawsuit. His arrest record is showing. And so these runs the gamut of people. And yet, the Milwaukee Police Department spokesperson here argues that this is just another tool like all the other tools they already have. Guns, cars, databases, and so on. And I actually appreciate her pointing that out because it made me recognize that they abuse those tools too. They often commit extrajudicial executions in our streets using their guns. Officers in 2020 abused their squad cars to kidnap an unhoused man, assault him, and dump him off in an alley near 27th Street, miles away from where he was picked up, despite his pleas for help, saying that he both had no idea where he was or how to get back to where they had picked him up. And most recently, in an extremely disturbing case, an officer named Jawan Madlock used his access to police databases to pass information to gang members while abusing his power to provide helpful tips, I guess, on how to avoid arrest, while also selling illegal firearms to these gang members.
Can you say the name again?
Jawan Madlock. And I guess an extra note I'd like to add about that is I was at the meeting with Chief Norman on Saturday, one of the meetings, and unfortunately I was the only resident that showed up. It was all media, me, and so I got to ask a lot of questions. And I asked them specifically about this case with Jawan Madlock. And I said, you know, I went back and I read your statement about this case, and what struck me is that it seemed like you had no idea this was going on until the FBI showed up to arrest this man. Of course, he hid behind the idea that this is an ongoing investigation and he can't comment, but he assured me that he was very disappointed in how he found him. I took that to mean that he did have no idea and that no one else in the department had any idea. And so if, as they want you to believe, only one officer is able to run around and do that type of thing, what does that mean when we add in access to facial recognition technology? I don't trust MPD when they say, oh, only 2 people will have access. I don't believe them. So if this is already happening, imagine what happens when those when their abilities get expanded. And so in closing, I'll just say that when the Milwaukee Police Department bats its eyes and smiles in our faces while insisting that we should extend them even more trust and tools, I think we should simply look at their history of horrific violence and misuse of the tools they already have and reject their push to expand surveillance tech in our state. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you. Have a Mohammed.
Just really quick before you do start, what he just said about the Jawan Madlock case is also similar to what happened in the aftermath of Seville Smith's murder. That the officer who killed Seville Smith felt uncomfortable with his police supervisor as to ask him.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.